Hello, and welcome to this online introduction to the basics of APA style. This presentation was created by Dr. Julia Grace Jester in connection with the Harrisburg Area Community College's Citation Resource Team. This is part one of a two-part series on APA style. This part will include all the information on the basics of APA style and why we use it. Part two will demonstrate examples of citations, references, and other components of APA style. Let's begin by talking about the purpose of APA style. Why do we use APA style when writing within psychology and other social science areas? Well, APA style is a way to communicate with our reader. It informs a reader of certain information, where we got things that we're talking about, the source of the knowledge we're using, and the formats we use tell them specific information such as when it was published, who wrote it, and how to access it themselves. APA style also allows us to give credit to the source of the knowledge. That's really important in helping to avoid plagiarism. When you're using information that was gathered or created by somebody else, you need to give credit to that person. Any information that comes from a source but isn't cited when it's supposed to be is technically plagiarized. So by always making sure to use consistent citations and references, you're making sure to give credit where credit's due. Using APA style also helps to support the conclusions and ideas that you're presenting with scientific data. So if you make a claim about a group or about a relationship between two factors, you're saying it is not just as your opinion, but as something backed up by the data presented in the resources that you're using. And in using APA style, we are using something that is consistent and make sure that all needed information is always there for anyone who wants to find out more. So for instance, the formats that are used in references don't just tell us who created the information and what year it was done, but also what type of resource it is. So it lets your reader know, did this information come from a book, from a journal article, from a website? That consistency means that no matter who's looking at it, or what the article or paper or chapter is, they always know what that information means. Now, when it comes to APA style, there's some major components. The first component, and the one that people think of the most, is the in-text citations. That is the information that's within the paragraphs of writing. When you're referring to something that was created by Smith in 2017, you give credit right then and there to Smith for that information. These in-text citations identify the source within that sentence, table, figure, etc. But there's also references. See, an in-text citation is incomplete. Smith 2017, for instance, doesn't tell you if it is a book or a journal or what the title is, and there's a lot of people named Smith who published something in 2017. So the reference is the complete information for the cited resources. This is different from some other citation formats in that we only include in our references things that are actually cited. So if there's something in your reference list that isn't cited, it doesn't have any meaning. The citations match up with the references and tell us, okay, I cited Smith 2017. I go to the reference list and I look for the resource that starts with Smith 2017, and then I know I found the right reference for that citation. That reference is what gives me the complete information for that resource, so that if I'm interested in learning more and looking at that resource, I now have everything I need to be able to find it. We include those references in a reference page. Now, for most things, this is a completely separate page at the end of the document. But for classes, make sure to ask your teacher or look at the teacher's requirements to see whether or not you need a separate reference page or just references listed at the end. But for APA papers or articles or chapters, we use a separate page at the end with the word references at the top of it centered. That is where we put all the references, and they're in alphabetical order by first author. We also have a title page, which informs the reader what the topic is, who wrote it, and where they are coming from. Many APA papers also need to include an abstract. An abstract is a summary of the entire document. And this isn't a teaser trailer. The abstract says, here's what this paper will cover, here's what it found, here's the conclusions. It gives it all away in a very short amount, usually between 150 and 250 words. Someone can glance at the abstract and decide whether or not it's a useful resource for them to look at. And then finally, most APA papers, chapters, etc. include headings. Headings help us to organize the paper or article so there's a sense of what we're talking about at each point and we know what to expect. So for instance, a primary research report for a study with human participants would have a methods section saying who they studied and how they studied them, and a results and discussion that reports and explains the outcomes of the research. If you're writing a literature review, your headings would be a little bit different because you wouldn't have a methods section, for instance. Those headings would then be used based upon your topic. Again, make sure to look to your teacher to see what sort of headings and expectations are required for your particular class. Here's some basic tips for using APA style. Don't assume you know the format. Always look it up. There's a lot of different formats depending upon the resource. So for instance, a textbook would have a different reference from a chapter in an edited book, which is a book that has chapters written by different individuals. And that's different from the format for a journal article or for a newspaper article. So don't assume you know the format. Look it up. When in doubt, cite. As I said before, if you don't cite, you run the risk of plagiarism. You can always pull back if you oversite, but you can't undo plagiarism. Cite all information from sources, not just quotes or whole paragraphs. Certain citation formats other than APA include citations only at the end of a paragraph. In APA, we often are citing multiple sources within a single paragraph, so we actually cite by sentences, not by paragraphs. Make sure to be detail-oriented. APA style is very specific in terms of things such as punctuation, capitalization, and italics, so make sure to pay attention to the details. Make sure to ask questions if you're ever unsure about something. It doesn't hurt to ask your teacher or to seek out other resources to figure out exactly what you need to do. Now, that's the end of part 1 of the basics of APA style. In part 2, I will go over some examples of in-text citations, references, and other APA components. So please see part 2.